Hello and welcome to today's AMA. This is your Chief Communications Officer at Zeta Capital, and I trust all of you are doing super well. Today is August 11th, 2023. Hopefully you get this today, but this is when it's recorded for sure. And this is going to be the big reveal of Zeta 2.0. And a lot of you already have sort of an idea, at least an idea of Zeta 2.0. Did a little bit of a soft reveal. I use that term kind of loosely. And I apologize, guys. We'll go ahead and make things a little bit more organized in the future. Sometimes we let our excitement and let some of the content get ahead of us. So there was some conversation. First it was in Prime, then it was in the overall general Discord about this is what we're doing and this is what we're... So all of a sudden started creating conversations. Other people who weren't there at the time came in and said, what's going on? And started asking questions that had already been answered. So anyway, we'll in the future, ensure not to get a little bit of ahead of ourselves. So apologize for that. But this is where a video like this and an AMA will be very handy. There'll also be an article and a transcript after this is recorded that will accompany the video for anyone who wants to read material. And this AMA, even though it's not live, this is going to be a bit of a long one because my intention is to start high level and get more and more into the weeds. So first, what is Zeta 2.0? Why are we doing it? And then how does it work, right? What does the migration look like? Already giving it away a little bit, spoiler alert. What does the migration look like? And what does the post-migration and pre-migration look like? And then get into your questions. So I won't be able to answer all the questions because most of this, even though it's called an AMA, most of this will be me going over the details of 2.0 and how it's going to work. And then hopefully getting to as many questions as I can. So I'll probably end up doing another one. Then see if maybe we can do a live one. But nonetheless, we have a lot of questions. And guys, just a reminder, please, AMA Questions channel in Discord. It's called AMA Questions because it's designed for AMA questions. Please don't have conversations in there. It looks like I'm being a little bit of a jerk when I come in there and tag everybody, but guys, there's a reason that channel is designed just for questions. If the entire conversation migrates into that channel in the Discord, and there's no point having it, I may as well just go into the Zeta chat and start pulling questions out. So this is to make my life easier, and if you can help make my life easier, I would appreciate that, as I will help make your lives easier in return. Okay, so let's go right into this. I don't need to show you our YouTube, our Twitter, none of that stuff. You all know where that is by now. But subscribe and follow us anyway. How about that? I'll make that short and painless for you. So, okay, let's first talk about what is Zeta 2.0 and why is there even a need for it? Like, why don't we just keep doing what we're doing right now? What's the point? A little bit of short story. So it'll include a little bit of what was already included in the year in review. If you have not watched or listened to the year in review, please go check that out. It's on our YouTube channel, speaking of which. So, when we originally designed Zeta Blue, now known as Zeta Blue, as you will know, and anybody who's been in business, you release a product, you release a service, best thing in the world, right? Can't even improve on it. And then the consumer, the end user, starts using it, utilizing it, and then you say, man, I could tweak this, I could do this, I can improve it here, I can improve it there. You don't know that in advance always, right? Until you start getting feedback and users using it. So obviously when we started, the intention was, and still is, by the way, to bridge traditional finance and decentralized finance. We have this world called DeFi, which is mostly a scam. Can I say that? I think I'm allowed to say that. And that's a broad stroke brush. I get it. It's not fair to say, but there's a lot of scams out there, and it's known for being a scam. I mean, if you mention DeFi to the average person, they're like, yeah, just the other day I was on a call with some people, and they were saying it's just good to meet good people. Because in DeFi, it's so rare to meet good people. So, not a fair statement, but a lot of DeFi is a scam. Not all of it. A lot of it is. Probably the majority, though, quite frankly. And you have a lot of promises of projects. We're going to do this, we're going to do that, and then they end up can't do it for one reason or another. And then you've got this whole world in traditional finance that exists with returns and access to certain financial instruments that the average person cannot get. So we said, why don't we bridge both these together and do it in a way that's unique, which is, man, we'll buy back your tokens with profits that we make. That's a pretty wild concept. And of course, it was originally 3 service offerings, one of them being blue chip. And it turns out that when you can make 25% a month, 25% a year doesn't sound as enticing. So we got more and more narrower, got rid of blue chip, and then opened up additional access to the high frequency trading with different tiers. So you can see we're getting more and more focused, right? Kind of picture a funnel, right? It's getting more and more aligned with what the user's looking for as time goes on, okay? So this is, again, a part where I've talked about experience drives innovation, which drives further experience, which drives further innovation. It's like a self-feeding, self-replicating system. And then we used Thorfi's OTC. So this is very interesting. You know, if people wanted to protect their value, still sell, they could be matched with a buyer. That's kind of cool. And of course, we improved on it after people had adopted it, made a better version, and ultimately said, okay, what if we stabilize the price, right? Let's not worry about liquidity, which, little side note, you don't have to worry about hackers in that instance, by the way, because there's nothing to hack. It's a little side note. So let's go ahead and stabilize the price in OTC. What does that do? Why do that? Well, that makes pretty much everybody happy. You can't make all the people happy all the time, but that makes pretty much everybody happy. Why? Because there's none of this, well, I bought in at 100 and now it's 60. I bought in at 60 and now it's 30. I bought in at 30 and now it's 10. I bought in at 10 and now it's $1 kind of issue, right? In this instance, if you bought at X, the price is X. Pretty simple, right? As a matter of fact, the price is going up. So anybody who bought in, I think it was March 11th. I don't have a calendar in front of me, apologize. But from that point on, your value was going up. So if you bought at 60, guess what? A couple months later, now 75. So not only did it not go down, but it went up, which means you ROI'd faster in that instance, which is a little side note. But nonetheless, what does that do? That does a couple of things. That does, it accomplishes people who want to have their value protected inside of the financial services. They have their value protected, okay? So the people who want to buy in and sell at a fairly stable price, they can do that too. They just have to be matched up with a buyer. So it's a pretty slick system, right? And I've always said the reason that it works is because we make money, we drive demand, because we have services that people want and actually need and want to use. So then, even before that, I should have went over, there was this demand for, man, what if you just 80-20 this and focus this even more? What if you just gave direct access to what people are here for? People are not here for the zones. They're not here for the token. They're here for the services. Because services didn't exist, I guarantee you wouldn't be as many zones, right? I pretty much guarantee that. I don't think there's anybody that would argue that, they came here just for the zones and just for the selling, right? Well, that maybe somebody did. I'm sure I'm going to be wrong. But point is that's why people are here. They're here because, well, these services are cool. High frequency trading is really cool. I want to, get access to that. The lakes are cool, of course, as well. We developed lakes. I even forgot about that new offering. So we started saying, okay, what would it look like if we sort of bypass this entire gamification element, which is zones, the timing of pools, the timing of lakes, this OTC thing, just a token in general. What if we got rid of all this complexity, right? We peeled back all the layers and we gave people direct, concise, specific access to what they're looking for. What would that look like? So that's why Zeta Black was developed. Zeta Black was developed for 2 reasons. Number one, back in, I think it was the original concept for Zeta Black was in early December. Right, it was early December we came up with that concept because there was no OTC at the time, so it was kind of like, well, man, what if we had a stable price and what would that look like, a direct access, and simplify this entire thing way more for the average person? Well, there happens to be something called a stable coin, which for the most part, knock on wood, is 1-for-1 the US dollar in value. So What if we use that as the mechanism to getting access to the same services without any, you got to have 25 zones or 10 or 50 or 75 or all this stuff. And oh man, you have to time pools and you don't, they're totally random. You don't know when they're going to open. Maybe they'll open at a certain time every day. Maybe they won't. Maybe it'll be every couple days. Maybe it won't. And then lakes, and you have to roll over, and then you get an airdrop after a couple months. So remove all that. What would that look like? And that's why we designed Zeta Black. It was actually out of demand from the end user who said, I just want something stable. I want something more predictable. I just want something easier. I want something simpler, right? So after the price in Zeta Blue was stabilized in an OTC model, we said, why do we need two stablecoin products? Because essentially that's what Blue is. It's a stablecoin, right? It's a stablecoin because it's programmatically set in the OTC, and it's programmatically set, of course, in the financial services. We don't need more than one stablecoin product. It doesn't make sense. The entire point, by the way, of Blue was for the token to go down, because if you think about it, the more users there is, the lower the token, the more pools that can absorb more tokens. So that $100,000 pool for 25% would absorb significantly more tokens if the token was $1, right? It really would. So because we, can I say this, kind of allowed people to have their cake and eat it too, with the point of the token price, being stabilized and maintaining all of the same sort of mechanisms. And when I say we, me and Gavin had designed a 2.0 that kept zones, that kept OTC, that kept pools, that kept lakes, and added probably about another 5 other gamified pieces to it. And it looked beautiful, frankly. But if you thought Blue was complex, you would have needed practically a PhD to explain this. Even our developers, who some of them are PhDs, by the way, looked at it and even they got scared and they looked at the flowchart. It was a thing for sure. Beautiful, but it was definitely complex. And we started looking at this after a couple of weeks and said, the conversation in Discord is obviously primarily geared around Zeta Black right now. People like Zeta Black. They like the predictability of it. They like the simplicity of it. They like the non-gamification of it. There's some gamified elements, but not very many at all. And they just like the skipping all the complexities that exist. The zones, the OTC, the timing. You don't have to worry about timing anything. And it just was something people wanted to know more about. It was still in testing phase. Still is, actually, technically. And so we started looking at what we had designed. I said, wouldn't it be better if people had a way to go over to Black, right? Wouldn't that be the ultimate option? Because quite frankly, and I don't think there's anybody that would fully disagree with this. Some might. Zeta Black is the superior product. It just is. I'm sorry, it just is. And a lot of people who have used both will testify to that. It's easy, it's simple to use, it's, it's all that stuff. You already know the litany. So we started thinking, anything that we designed would always be inferior to Black, always. So why don't we just move you over to the product that's better anyway, right? And skip all this other stuff and just make this simpler and easier. And how would that look? What would that look like? I had some people suggest that in the past. I said, if you think about Black accounts, and you guys know Zeta Black, know what I'm talking about. Black accounts are backed by real money, stablecoin, whereas a zone really isn't backed by cash value, right? It's backed by tokens. What is the token? Well, $75. Why? Because we say so, essentially, right? So it's that sort of argument. So the only way to allow people to be bridged over and migrated over to the better product is for us to put our money where our mouth is, essentially, right? To set aside money to do it. Right? Now this is, again, remember, on top of the stabilization of the $75 price, on top of buying back tokens, on top of all that. So we're saying, hey, we're going to put forth even more money to bridge you over to black, just because it's better. And quite frankly, it's easier for us too. It's better for the company too. It's better for the user. It's just better for everybody. Everybody wins. And you're going to see that in the math. So that's the reason for what, Zeta 2.0. So, you're going to have a choice in Zeta 2.0. We're going to get into that in just a minute, but I've had DMs with probably, I don't know, 50 to 100 people, probably even more than that, in the last week and a half or so. And I have seen all sorts of examples. I've got this many zones. I've got that many zones. They're this old. They're that old. I got this much in pools. I've got that much in lakes. I put this much fresh money in. I have not yet had an example where anybody loses money in this migration, regardless of which option they take. And I'm going to show you some examples. As a matter of fact, I might even pull some out of my DMs, but I won't obviously mention the person because there are so many unique examples. I just want to show you the math. So, at this point, discussed, okay, the intention of blue, bridging DeFi and TradFi, got a little more focused over time. Even more focused where people suggested a stabilized direct access, really 80-20 this for me, focused product called Zeta Black. And then over time, seeing how black just overtook blue in terms of the superiority of the product. And then obviously now we're talking about why Zeta 2.0 is going to be migrating people from blue to black. Okay. So we've gone over that. Let's go over, so we're going to look at a couple of things. So we're going to look at some examples of math, but we're going to look at some examples of math only after explain what the migration path and journey is going to look like. Then we're going to go over some post and pre-migration conversations, and then we're going to get into your questions. So let's go ahead and look into what will this migration actually look like when it comes to dollars and cents. Okay, so you've got zones and you've got financial services. Let's just say you're in Zeta Blue. You got a number of zones and you got some financial service positions. You'll have to make a choice in this migration. This upcoming migration, it is a choice. It is one choice. It's not two or three choices. It's one choice. You can opt to migrate your zones, or you can opt to migrate your financial services. Cannot choose both. Okay. For example, let me run you through a quick example here. Let's say you have 100 zones, right? This is an example. Your zones will be migrated over to Zeta Black as black accounts based on how old the zones are. Okay, so a zone returns 365%, as you know, up to 1% a day, and people who buy them ROI in 100 days. So we came up with a structure that any zone that is newer than 100 days, starting at the point of whenever to the day of migration. So the day of migration, count 100 days back. Okay, that's how it's going to be determined. Those would be valued at full price, $750. So if you think about it, if you had your zones for 99 days, you've essentially ROI'd, but guess what? They're still going to be migrated at the full $750 price. So what does that look like? So let's just say you have, we're going to use an example, 100 zones. 50 of them are newer than 100 days. Let's say 25 of them are older than 100 days, but newer than 200 days. And 25 of them are older than 200 days. So it's newer or older than 100 and older than 200. That's how they're valued. 3 value phases. If your zones are newer than 100 days, you will get 2 black accounts for every 1 zone. In Zeta Black, black accounts act very similarly to a zone, meaning that you buy them with a stable coin, they return a stable coin. Done. Easy. Simple. Very similarly to a zone, except they emit, I shouldn't say they emit, they don't emit anything, it's trading that's taking place. But basically you claim stablecoin, you don't claim a Zeta token. Okay, so there's 3 flavors as of right now to the Zeta Black accounts. There's a $250, a $500, and a $1,000 black account. They all return up to, not guaranteed, up to 1% per day, and they each cost $25 per month. And they each have a 2.5% withdrawal fee that's just taken out of the withdrawal. It doesn't require fresh stablecoin. Okay, so with that in mind, if a zone is newer than 100 days, it is valued at $750, but we don't have a $750 black account, $250, $500, $1,000. So how's that going to work? So for every zone that's newer than 100 days, you will get 2 black accounts, a $500 and a $250. You get, basically it's a 2-for-1 deal, okay? For any zone that is older than 100 days, but still newer than 200, will be valued at half price, $375. Now again, we don't have a $375 black account, so how does that work? Well, you have to exchange 2 zones for 2 black accounts. So, in other words, for that to work, you have to have 2 older zones, we'll say, right, that are older than 100 days, newer than 200, and you will get 2 black accounts, a 500 and a 250. In the event that the math doesn't work out evenly, because math never does, let's just say, especially in our example here, we're saying you have 25 of these. Well, 25 divided by 2 is 12.5. Well, you can't get half of a black account or half a zone, so how's that going to work? So in that instance, you would get 24 black accounts, and then that last one that's not a 2-for-2, you just get a $250 black account. That's how we make up for it. And any zone that is older than 200 days will be valued 1 zone to 1 $250 black account. It's a lot of math. It'll be spelled out in the article. Re-listen to this section over again as many times as you need to. But let's go over some math. So let's say you're this user. You have 100 zones. You have 50 of them that are newer than 100 days. 25 of them that are older than 100 days, but still newer than 200 days, and 25 of them that are older than 200 days. So you have 50, 25, and 25 falling in those categories. So the way you would run this math is you would take 50, multiply it by $750. That's a value of $37,500 in black accounts. Now, in this example, you would get 2 black accounts for every zone. So your 50 zones would equal 100 black accounts. That's just for these 50 that are newer than 100 days. Now the next tranche is 25 zones. You have 25 zones that fall into the older than 100, but still newer than 200. Now, because you have 25, it can't be a perfect 2-for-2. That's why I chose this number, because it's a great example that shows you what would happen in this scenario. You would get 24 black accounts with 1 remaining, which would just be turned into a 250. So let's do this math. So it'd be 24 multiplied by 375. That would equal 9,000 plus the 250. So 9,250. Then you have the last 25. That would be multiplied by 250. That's 6,250. Now, if we add all those up, it's a lot of math. If we add all that up, it equals $53,000 in total. Okay? Now, if you wanted to multiply, now I will be very clear here. Returns are not guaranteed. There is no such thing in life as guaranteed anything other than death. The old saying is death and taxes. Well, we know people avoid paying taxes all the time, so we know death is the only thing in life that's guaranteed. So as I run this math, please keep in mind, it's not a guarantee of anything. This is simply mathematics to help clarify your decision, which, by the way, when the migration period occurs, you're going to see all this math anyway. I'm just helping you hopefully kind of understand how this is going to work in advance and run some calculations in advance. That's it. Nothing more than that. Okay? So you have up to 1% a day per black account. Just for the easy sake of math, we'll just remove the 28-day thing for a minute. You have a total value of $53,000 in black accounts. In this example, which was again 100 zones, 50 newer than 100 days, 25 older than 100 days but newer than 200 days, and 25 older than 200 days. Comes out to 53,000. Now, if you were to multiply this by 30%, take out the 2.5% withdrawal fee, and you add in the number of black accounts that you're actually getting, because it's $25 per black account. So what does that come out to? If you remember, the first tranche of 50 zones equaled 2 black accounts, so that's 100. The next tranche was 25. Okay, so that's 125. And then the last tranche was 25, so it's 150 black accounts. So you would multiply 25 by 150, that's 3,750. So our number after all fees, and I'm subtracting pretty much everything that I can think of here. I'm subtracting the 2.5% withdrawal plus how many black accounts you get. And that would come out, if the math holds, to about $11,750 monthly. Now, black accounts expire after 1 year, very similarly to zones. Okay, they normally have a sunk cost. In this instance, your black accounts are essentially being purchased and migrated for you. In a year's time, that would come out, if the math held true, every single month for 12 months, which is not a guarantee of returns. Be wary of anybody who guarantees returns. A little side note, I'm just running math, would be $141,000. Now, you could take that $141,000 and you can divide how much fresh money you put into the system. This is what I've been telling people. People think they're losing something. So, okay, how much money did you put in? We'll say, well, and this is me, isn't picking on anybody. This is just an example. Somebody might say, well, I'll put $30,000 in. I bought X number of zones and I bought tokens to put in the pool. Okay, in that example, you'd make $141,000 divided by 30,000, there's your ROI, or 50,000, or however much you put in. This is simply nothing more than an example. So that is how that math would work if you chose your zones. Now again, if you have anything in financial services, you are foregoing that. That is how a choice works. When the decision is A or B, the decision you don't choose is foregone. For example, if I choose option A, on a game show, I can't go behind option B's curtain and go and choose that one after the fact, right? Typically, you'll see in the game show analogy, it's kind of a, it's kind of a silly analogy, but you kind of get the point. If you make a choice, you can't then go back and say, well, I want that other choice now. It's one or the other, guys. So I'll get into some of those nuances here shortly. So let's say you've got some sort of sizable financial service position. Now you know how the zone math works. Okay? What does the financial service math look like if you want to opt to choose that and forego the zones? So a couple things. Your lakes and your pools. Let's talk about that, because those are the two financial service positions you would be migrating. So for a pool, you need a minimum of $10,000 in your total balance. So that's principal that you put in, plus whatever has gained up to this point. It has to be at least $10,000 for you to qualify to migrate a pool. The reason being is because in order to open trading, we really need a bare minimum of $10,000. It's actually $25,000, but we have a workaround. Our wealth management partner has a workaround, I should say, but you get the point. In order to bring that down to 10. So you got to have 10,000. What if you don't have 10,000? What happens? Well, your pool balance, let's say it's 9,600. Okay, this is a great example. You would get 10 black accounts, you would get 9 $1,000 black accounts and 1 $500 black account. So it would be rounded down to the nearest whatever, $500 in this instance. Those black accounts would last for 2 years. Now, black accounts last for 1 year, as I mentioned. So this would be, if you have less than 10,000 divided into basically $1,000 black accounts, these are special 2-year black accounts. They go for 2 years. That's going to be the same with your lakes. So take your lakes, divide it by 1,000, round it down to the nearest 500, and that will be how many black accounts you get. Again, special 2-year black accounts, because we had mentioned, it's kind of interesting. So even though we never actually said lakes would go for 2 years, I kind of hinted at it at a previous AMA, and then people kind of, just said, oh yeah, it's going to last for 2 years. So, okay. So we're still going to play off of that. So your lake deposits would be rolled over into special 2-year black accounts. Again, black accounts last for 1 year, so these are special black accounts. Now, let's say you have enough for pools to migrate. You got at least 10,000 in there. Okay, so regardless of which tier you are in, inside of blue, your total balance will be moved over to a single black pool, regardless of how many blue pools you have. And it will be moved into the tier based on black's existing tiers, not based on where you are. So if you have, for example, I'll just say $50,000 in a 25% pool, you be getting 20%, not 25. The reason being is because black's tiers are the following: $10,000 for 10%, $25,000 for 15%, $50,000 for 20%, and $100,000 or more for 25%. Now, black has a 5 and a 30% pool. People will not be bumped down nor bumped up to either one of those because they didn't exist in blue. So we're just working with the tiers that exist in blue, but they have to migrate into black's requirements, if that makes sense. So if you have 50,000 in total pool balance, let's say, but they're spread across a 10%, a 15%, a 25%, say, right? It doesn't matter because you have the total balance of 50, at least, that will be moved into a 20% black pool. Okay? So again, 10,000 is 10%, 25,000 is 15, 50,000 is 20, and 100,000 is 25. If you fall in between them, just use the previous one and that's where you would land. Okay? So, the math on that return, you could pretty much kind of run it for yourself. So I gave you some math on the zone migration. So if you wanted to start running math on, say, your black accounts for lakes, or your black accounts because you have less than 10,000 pools, or your black accounts for lakes plus your pools. I've run this math before, but I'll kind of run you through it again. It's pretty simple. If you have a black account, let's just say you got, 50,000 in lake deposits. I just use this as an example. So you have 50,000 multiplied by 30%. In that case, you would get 50 black accounts. So 50 multiplied by the $25 monthly fee is $1,250. Now 50,000 at 30% is 15,000. Taking out the 2.5% withdrawal and all fees, just under 13,400 a month. No, over 24 months, that's 321,000. Again, not a guarantee of profits. This is how you would run your math. Okay? And if you had, let's just say, a $50,000 pool balance, right? So you would have $50,000 migrating to a 20% pool, compounded over a year. If 20% was hit every month and it compounded and you didn't touch it for a year, that turned into about 440,000, give or take. So you can see that, again, the people that use the financial services will win greater than the people that migrate zones. And that's not necessarily a condescending statement. Maybe the people who are migrating zones just got in. So that might just be the better choice. Just kind of keep in mind that black accounts from lakes and black accounts from pools, if you don't have 10,000, last 2 years. So there's an advantage there. Pools have an advantage because you can always liquidate if you want, right? Whereas a black account for a zone, you have to wait the whole year. You're obviously withdrawing as you go along, but the point is you know, pools provide an advantage of liquidation if necessary because you want your original principal, right? Which were, again, and this is not, again, not a condescending statement, but tokens that were bought back, right? So if you think about it in terms of, well, I bought X number of zones and then I claimed tokens and put the tokens into a pool, the only money that you put in was the zones. So your ROI is based on what you make divided by what you put in. That's why I want people to remember this. You know, the Zeta token is 75 because that's what we deemed it to be. If the Zeta token is $1, very different mathematics. That's the reason why these financial service positions exist in the first place. So that is the math behind it. Now, there's a lot of math that could be run. The point is this will give you kind of like a starting place. This will give you an idea. And when you see the migration actually take place, all this math is going to be run for you. You're going to see one side versus the other side. And quite frankly, again, after having all the various messages with a lot of people over the last week and a half who just wanted some clarity, there is no example that I've seen where anybody loses money. As a matter of fact, I think the worst case that I even ran across was somebody doubles 2.5 times, their money. I'm looking at a DM here. That is the worst one that I've seen. That doesn't mean that you will fall in a certain range. I'm giving a pure example based on what you put in versus this migration versus what you end up getting out and so forth. Now, when you migrate over your financial services, there's a couple things to be aware of, or really your zones, either one I should say. First of all, the first month, the first 28 days that you move over to black will be fee free on the monthly fees. So if you have black accounts, if you have black pools, your monthly fees will be waived for the first 28 days, right? Just because in black, as pools grow, that 2.5% monthly fee grows. So we want to provide a little bit of breathing room for people who are migrating over from a zone system to more of a structured fee tier system. Okay, so first 28 days, you can't withdraw, obviously, because you have to let it trade. And during that time, you're not going to pay any monthly fees. Now, there's a lot of different questions that are kind of coming up. We're going to get into some of those questions. But specifically, I want to deal with the migration path, right? And I want to deal with this choice, this journey, the path that people are going to choose. So when I started this, I said you have one choice, option A, option B, right? Zones, financial services. So, and this isn't a knock, but it's human nature, I should say. Human nature is typically, okay, it's got to be some way I can choose both, right? It has to be some way, some roundabout way I can find a way to get both. Can't choose both. So it's one choice or the other. So the question is, okay, what if I go and click withdraw or liquidate, and then I go choose my zones? What's going to happen? Well, remember, any withdrawals take 28 days to arrive. Well, this migration is going to be far sooner than 28 days. If you choose your zones, that means you forego the other option, like I said earlier. So if I click withdraw, right, or liquidate, whatever, and migration comes, and let's say it's, 2 weeks from now, as an example, 14 days, and 28 days normally to withdrawal, and I haven't received it yet, and I choose my zones, I'm foregoing the financial services, which means I'm foregoing any claims that are pending attached to those financial services, if that makes sense, right? You can't get a claim on something that you're foregoing. It just doesn't make sense. So if you choose your financial services in that example, then once the 28-day thing is up, you'll get it, just like you normally would. But that would then be subtracted from your pool balance. So let's just say you got a pool and it's $60,000, right? You put 50 grand in as a 20% pool, you got 10,000 profit, you pull 10 grand. Migration day comes, you choose financial services. you will get 50,000 transferred because you have 10,000 pending. And then whenever the 28 days is up, you'll get that 10,000 obviously sent to you, right? With a potential delay only because we are having to migrate a significant amount of the fund over to black pools, which I'll get in when we cover post-migration, but that's how that's gonna work. So somebody who has already withdrawn, liquidated, and is still waiting for that to arrive, if it arrives before migration, right, and you choose zones, it is what it is. You choose zones, you did it early, you got it in time, that is what it is. If you do that and you choose financial services, obviously that just gets subtracted to whatever gets migrated. If it hasn't arrived in time and you choose zones, you're foregoing that claim because you're foregoing the financial service position. So you would forego any pending claim to that. Okay, so I just want to make sure people understand that. Okay, and hopefully that provides clarity. So again, I'm not saying anybody's trying to game it. I'm not saying people are trying to figure a roundabout way. I'm just saying if you see a decision and it's one or the other, it truly is one or the other, guys. It's not finding a way to do 2, 3, 4, 5 options. So it's one choice or the other. And again, hopefully that provides clarity. If you withdraw, has to arrive in time by migration, unless you choose your financial services, in which case it will eventually arrive. Which then brings up another point, which is, and this hasn't been publicly announced, it's been announced inside of the Zeta Black channel. And I'm going to share some things that even they don't know in this as well. The Zeta Black tiers are changing, okay? Now, the Zeta Black tiers, currently, as I had stated, you had $1,000 for a 5% pool, $10,000 for 10, $25,000 for 15%, $50,000 for 20%, $100,000 for 25%, and $250,000 for 30%. Okay, well that's changing. And this will happen by the end of this month. And it will look like the following. Pools will have their new tiers, and those new tiers will be $10,000 for 5%, $50,000 for 10%, $100,000 for 15%, and $250,000 for 20%. And black accounts will be up to 20% per month instead of 30. So we're going to be looking at 20% being the top tier as we move. Now, anybody who happens to get a 25% pool will be grandfathered in. So that means you have a black account that is up to 30%, you'll be grandfathered in. So guess what? Anybody that chooses their financial services in this migration is grandfathered into the current rates today, not the new rates that are coming, not the new tiers. So the black accounts you get will be up to 1% per day. The pools you get will be at the tiers today, not the tiers that I just said that are coming later. After migration, by the end of this month, those will be the new tiers. Now, that's important because if somebody is considering liquidating to go into black and then choose their zones, you're not going to get the same tier. So there's a benefit to actually choosing financial services if you are in certain tier points because you get grandfathered in. If you have 50,000, for example, in pool balance, you will be grandfathered into the 20% tier. Well, when these new changes in the black tier structure change, you would need 250,000 for that same exact tier. Okay, so there's a huge benefit. If you could literally be in for 5 times less to cash for that same tier, huge benefit. And 25%, it won't exist. So there you go. Huge benefits for being grandfathered in. And of course, if you just go into black before the changes are made, you'll be grandfathered in as well. We're also going to be making some withdrawal changes in the schedule in black. This will also occur after migration, I'll say, but will definitely be by the end of this month, August. So when the pool tiers change, as I just mentioned, we're going to change the withdrawal schedule a little bit because as it stands right now, withdrawals can be fairly chaotic for a couple of reasons. Number one, you've got lakes due on different days. You've got pools being withdrawn and liquidated to move up the tiers and doing all this kind of stuff on different weekends. And then you got black accounts, you got black pools, and so you got blue and black and all these various dates that people can withdraw. And that's not even counting, you know, uncharted or anything like that. So it can be fairly chaotic. And then you add on the issues with the back end, which we are rebuilding our own back end from scratch. Sometimes the withdrawals don't even fire off properly, so people are waiting or wondering why they didn't get their withdrawal, and turns out that the system didn't even alert us that there was a withdrawal because there's some sort of collision on the back end, which is, you know, common with the existing system that we have outgrown, which is why we're building our own. So add all this stuff together and it can be fairly chaotic. So we're going to change the withdrawal schedule to be a lot more accurate, cleaner, and simpler. So after the new tiers that I just mentioned in black, we'll be introducing the following withdrawal schedule. This will apply for accounts first. So on the 1st and 2nd of every month, you can initiate a withdrawal from your black account. Easy. If you don't do it on the 1st or 2nd, you gotta wait till the next 1st and 2nd of the next month. Okay, black pools. You can initiate withdrawals and or liquidations on the 15th and 16th of each month. If you miss it, you gotta wait till the next month. So what this does is it takes all of this dates all over the place and it makes it very simple. We know black account withdrawals come on these 2 days, pool withdrawals come on these 2 days. That's it, done, easy, simple. Very predictable, and when we're on our new back-end system, everything will fire off properly, we'll get notifications properly. We just have outgrown the existing system, which is a testament to, you know, what it is we're doing here, of course. So you have new system, new withdrawal dates, you know exactly when things are initiated, exactly when they need to come. And all of this is going to be part, and I'll say this, ever since February, Zeta Black has been technically in a pre-sale. Probably seen Gavin say that as well. What does that mean? It's been in a pre-sale. Well, with the tiers that are changing, right? If you happen to get in at the tiers that are existing right now, you're technically on a pre-sale because the highest tier will be 20% per month. So if you have a 25% pool, you're not going to get that again, right? Somebody will never get a 30% pool again. So same with black accounts, right? Until those black accounts expire, essentially, they will, I can't use the word emit. I keep using the word emit, I apologize, but they will have a claim, I'll say, to stablecoin at up to 1% a day until they expire. Whereas the new ones will be 20%, up to 20% per month. So if you choose either your zones or your financial services, technically you were part of that pre-sale in a roundabout sort of way. And, you know, ultimately all of this, as we're looking at it, is really coming to a head to a single product, which in testing has been called Zeta Black. But when the tiers change and everybody gets grandfathered in, will be Zeta Genesis, which is the genesis of Zeta Capital, which is a technology company, with our single flagship product. Now we're going to go into what does post and pre-migration sort of look like. One point that I need to mention that I forgot to cover, if you are choosing your zone migration, friend zones do not get migrated. Why? Why wouldn't a friend zone get migrated? The primary reason a friend zone would not get migrated is because there was no tokens purchased to buy a friend zone, right? It was somebody else who built zones that happened to click on your link. So for, you know, roughly $25 to $30 a month, depending on how often you claimed, you probably wouldn't have claimed 3 times from a friend zone because it doesn't emit as much. Basically, we'll say for $25 a month, you enjoyed additional emissions that allowed you to get heavier positions in financial services and, you know, maybe compounding into more zones. So ultimately they serve their purpose, but they will not be part of the migration only because there was no tokens that were used to buy them. It was XREF, which was essentially a, not even a token, but it was just more of a notification value, right? When people built zones using your friend zone link. So I just wanted to cover that. So again, so we discussed Zeta Black's new brand, right? That's going to be exciting. Now, some of you who are maybe IT nerds, you might remember back in the day, there was a great operating system called Windows XP. You don't have to be a nerd to remember that, but following that was going to be another operating system. And while it was in testing, it was actually called Windows Longhorn. I don't know how many people actually remember this, but it's called Windows Longhorn. And of course, as we know, when it was released, it was called Windows Vista, which is probably the worst operating system in the history of operating systems. But the point being is that it's very common for rebrands and code names to be used during testing that vary when you go public. When I say public, I mean it's released publicly. So that's kind of what Zeta Black is going to be. So that's why when Gavin had said, there's not going to be any more black pools and any more black accounts after the end of this month, people got really confused because they won't be called black accounts. They won't be called black pools, and they won't have those tiers anymore. They'll be called something totally different because the product will be rebranded into Zeta Genesis, which I love that name. Not just for biblical reasons, but due to the story of really migrating both of these products into a single one and kind of recreating it and benefiting everybody. So love that for a lot of reasons. So post-migration, what does this look like? First of all, if you're going to migrate, yes, your fees need to be paid. Pay your fees. They need to be up to date. Okay? So until otherwise stated, it's business as usual, guys. So zone fees, you don't necessarily have to claim unless you want to. You can literally just sit in the position you're in, but make sure your membership fees are paid up to date. That's why they're called a membership fee. If you want to regain your position and have the option of either one of these two, you need to make sure your membership fees are paid up to date. So please ensure those are. And at the time of migration, if they're not, you'll have the option of doing that as well and getting up to date. But post-migration, so there's a few things here to kind of bear in mind, which is that there's a couple of things that have to happen. Primarily, what has to happen is anybody that's in pools, blue and black pools work very differently. So I've oftentimes been asked, why do black pools tend to hit the top of their ceiling, whereas the 25% blue pools don't always hit the top of their ceiling of 25% per month? Why is that? The primary reason is because if you look at the way blue is structured to where pools, the name pools actually makes a little bit more sense than black. Hence probably the change of the name, but nonetheless, the idea behind a pool, air quote, that you can't see me doing, in blue is that people can pool together to meet that minimum. Because originally, if we're talking, we need, at least 25,000. I thought, well, that's a lot for one person. What if somebody can't hit 25,000? How do they participate? So this idea of a pool was introduced where you could buy part, I could buy part, somebody else could buy part, and it would all pool together to create one position. Now, the way that's traded is a little complex, but essentially what happens is because you might own a block or 2 or 10 or 20 or whatever in a pool, even though the minimum trading is roughly 25,000 open a pool, we have workarounds for 10, but roughly 25,000. You might own one block of the $100,000 pools we typically open. Let's just go with this 25% example for a minute. You might own one block. You might own $1,000 of this $100,000 pool, right? What happens if you choose to withdraw $200 out of your $1,000, which is out of this $100,000 pool, right? So the way that's traded is very different than black, where you have one pool, one owner, that's it. They own the full amount or they own none of it. Very different because now, okay, if this is a $100,000 pool, this is hitting roughly this amount. If somebody withdraws, the only thing they can withdraw is either 25, 50, 75, or 100% based on the profit calculation. But when you have somebody that owns one block, 2 blocks, 8 blocks, 20 blocks, it could be anything. You could have any number of block owners with any number of blocks. It's totally random because it just depends who gets into a pool in blue. Traded very, very differently, right? You have to hedge differently. You have to be able to withdraw smaller amounts more easily. It just changes the game, right? To a degree. Whereas in black, it's very, very predictable. Again, I keep using this word predictable in black because black is very predictable, not just for the end user, but also for us as well, essentially. So that's one reason why that works the way that works. So when we're talking about, you know, somebody that has a few blocks in this pool and a few blocks in that pool and their profit, that's compounded up to now. Somebody could theoretically be in 15, 20, 30 pools, theoretically, right? They could. Which means that when people are being migrated into a single black pool, we now have to pull them out of trading and move them over, right? It isn't as if, you know, you press a button, it changes them over. It's different because of the way the structure works. If I have $50,000 balance, let's say, spread across 7 pools with multiple blocks in different pools, those have to be then removed, modified, brought over into a special pool in black because you can't open, say, a $61,473.21 pool, okay, in black, just as an example, right? So we're migrating these special values that exist, but then on the back end, we have to then move that person over to a new tier with a new cap in a new system that's not blue, it's called black, which will be called Genesis at the time, with a new fee structure. So this is going to take time. The migration period, there will be a period of downtime in order for this transition to occur, right? So it's not going to be a 1, 2, 3, Thanos snaps his fingers and everybody opens up a dashboard and they see everything they want. It's going to take some time. How much time, I don't know as of right now. Probably no more than a couple weeks at very most. Now, so the questions are going to be, okay, well, you said we would get the first month of fees free. Does that start day 1 of the migration while you're doing this, or does that start when you're done? It starts when we're done. So your 2-year, your 1-year black accounts will start when that process is finished post-migration for us to move everybody over, right? Because you got to remember, blue is the vast majority of the Zeta Capital funds. So you're literally moving 70%, 75, maybe 80% of the fund over. That's going to take some time. And your day 1 for your black pools, for your black accounts, versus when they expire, starts when we finish. It doesn't start while we're doing it. It's not as if, oh yeah, you're going to get a month free, but by the way, there's not going to be any trading during that time because we're micro. No, it starts when we're done. Just want to make sure that people are very clear on that. So there'll be a period of time where we'll keep you guys informed on what the updates look like, and then once we're finished, you'll have a whole new app to log into. You'll see your pools, you'll see your accounts, you'll see everything migrated over as usual, and then your month of free fees begins. Okay, and then you'll have to wait 28 days to initiate any kind of withdrawal, which will be dependent on that new schedule that I mentioned. So I hope that makes sense. It's a few pieces. So then we have pre-migration, which is right now. What do I do right now? Well, that's up to you. I can't tell you what to do, but you have these 2 options. You have a fork in the road. You go left, you go right. Zones, financial services. What do you do with outstanding tokens? It's really up to you, right? You might consider whatever you're doing, do it more, right? So in other words, if you're choosing your zones, build more zones, if that's what you want to do. Because once migration is getting closer, we will announce that you may or may not be able to build zones at a certain date, because obviously we have to have a cutoff date with a snapshot and all that good stuff. So whatever you're doing, do more of it. That's really the only recommendation I can give you. No unclaimed tokens are not being bought. No tokens that aren't used are not being bought. That's why the zones are being bought, because the zones are what emit the tokens. And again, if you have a zone that's at 99 days, for example, being bought back at full price, which is a heck of a deal, right? So if you're ever on the cusp of, 0 to 99, 100 to 199, 200 to day 364, or whatever calendar year we fall into, you're still getting value out of that. And you're being restarted from day 1 again, because black accounts then go for another year. and there's a free month of fees on top of it. So it's a heck of a deal. Whether you go with financial services or zones, in my opinion, financial services almost always outpace zones in the long run, depending on your position, of course. But keep in mind, you know, these are rough numbers. I don't have them in front of me. But if you run compounding for 1 year on just 10%, right? Well, I can run that for you. Let's say you have $10,000 in any one of the tiers. You know, in a year, if 10% was hit every month, not guarantee of profits, you know, your 10 turns into 31,000. So it's a 313% essentially. You know, at a 15%, turns into 53,000. It's like 535%. Right? At a 20%, turns into 89. It's at 8.91x on your money. Right? And of course, at a 25, if it hit it every single month, would turn into 145,000. So it's like a 14.5x. So in the long run, pools will eventually outpace zones. I'm just saying, it's not to influence the decision. These are just things. It's not today, it's tomorrow, and it's the next day. And that's what everybody who's coming to Zeta, who's using the services, has been looking at thus far, which is, okay, if I get into this pool over time, this is what it builds to. Well, that hasn't changed, right? So consider these in your decision, because it's not always what you make in the next 30 days, it's what you can make in the next 30 months, is what I've found, to generate real wealth. So we're launching these oceans. The oceans will turn into black accounts. What does that mean? Well, here's the thing. If anybody who is not in financial services, let's say, you know, I have $0 in, right? I have to choose my zones. I have no other option. There is no other pill to choose. There is no other journey for me to go on. That fork in the road is a one-way street. So I thought, well, darn it, let's give them an option. Let's give people who are like, you know, I came here for the services, but I can't get in lakes, I can't get in pools, they close too darn quickly. Maybe I have 25 zones, maybe I got 75, maybe I got 50, it doesn't matter. Point is, I can't get in, I'm not sitting by my computer all day. I wish I would have went into black. I actually had several people say, I wish I would have went into black day one, which is why this is gonna be great for them. But putting that aside for a moment, the ocean that we launched, which is still open, as of the recording right now, whether it's open by the time this gets released is another point, but that was and is for those who have nothing in financial services. You can jump into that, and there's a reason why it's at $250 increments. It just makes it easier when people want to migrate, if they choose to migrate. This gives you another option. In other words, now you can really entertain both options, right? Because if you have nothing in financial services, it's a pretty darn easy option. There's only one choice. If you use this ocean, maybe you heard about this migration. You're like, I don't know what to do. Now you have an option. Now you can actually do something. So if you want to choose financial services, if this is something you actually want, the ocean's for you. That's what that's intended for. And those will turn into 2-year black accounts, just like the lakes, just like those who have less than 10,000 in pools. So there's been a question of what about everybody else? So we want to launch another ocean. It won't necessarily be for everybody, but it will capture more people. Okay, so the idea is that the next ocean, if you want to prepare for it, will be geared towards everybody who has 25,000 or less in financial services. So take your pools, take your lakes, add them up. If you have 25,000 or less, you will see the next ocean. So now what we're doing is we're capturing more. We're casting a wider net. If you have 25,001 penny, you won't see it, right? So somebody who's like, gosh, you know, I got 50 zones, I got 8,000 in pools, I got nothing in lakes, I'm gonna probably choose my zones. Well, because again, couldn't get into financial services and there's just not quite enough meat on the bone. If you're considering that and you haven't pulled the trigger yet, you might want to wait for the next ocean. That might be something that you are interested in participating in, and that will give you something more to choose when it comes to your ultimate decision. If you don't get into oceans, if there's not an ocean for you, your position is where you will be at when you make your decision. Which again, regardless, and I know some people who they fully liquidated their pool, tried to get into a higher tier, could not do so, so they just end up buying more zones with it. Well, even that person still gets compensated in this because now they just have more zones to be migrated to black accounts. So again, regardless of how you sort of skim a cat here, nobody comes out behind, everybody comes out ahead. And that's an important point to make. So now you have sort of the bird's eye view, the top-down sort of thought process behind this, why we're migrating, how it's just superior product, and we're putting our own money where our mouth is in order to do so. And you have your choices and your various variables, various variables of what happens if you withdraw or liquidate from pools and you choose zones. What happens if you don't pay your fees? What do you do before and what do you do after? Let's get into some questions. I'm only going to take a few because this has already been going on long enough. But with this information, which will be combined with more information, will be combined with articles and more content and some math, should help you to be able to make a better, more informed decision. And I'm sure there's maybe something that I didn't cover. So as needed, whether it's to add or remove anything or provide more clarity, I'll go ahead and do that. But let's go ahead and get into your questions that you submitted in the AMA questions in the meantime. And if I don't get to your question, we'll just record another one at a later date. All right, so we've got some questions in AMA questions. I'm just gonna kind of blow through these as quick as I can, so it might be just really, really quick answers. Will keeping zones up to date on fees not matter if we're going to choose a financial service route and not migrating zones? Yes, you have to pay your fees if you're overdue in order to choose an option. You will see that on the migration screen. Is there an option to put any more funds into Blue Pool? No. At this stage, Ocean's only moving forward, guys. So no. And I'm going to go ahead and put a green check mark if I've answered your question. Just kind of makes it easier so I don't accidentally in a future AMA go over the same question again. Crypto dude, I'm not sure I understand your question. Will black pool withdrawals be taken directly from interest gained? I don't understand the question. I apologize. If you're withdrawing profits, it's always from profits unless you liquidate. If you want to provide some clarification, I'll help answer that. Go ahead and DM me if you'd like. Is there a set date for migration? Soon. That's the best I can give you. Sorry. No, there's no set date. It's very soon. Very soon. Will we get a bit of notice before closure of zone buildings? Of course, you will get a notice. It won't be a 28-day notice. And why? Somebody said, well, why wouldn't you do this 20-day? Okay, so if you remember the liquidity migration from Radio Shack to, well, it wouldn't migrate liquidity to OTC, but we pulled the liquidity, in other words. If you recall that, there was no announcement. Why? When it comes to liquidity, you gotta be extremely careful not to allow people to game things. Right? You got to be really, really, really cautious when it comes to liquidity. Liquidity is no joke. Believe me, you're talking to somebody that has been through the school of hard knocks, right? So when it comes to a situation where you have to choose A or B, it's just human nature to try to find a way to do both. Doesn't mean you guys are going to try to game anything, but it reduces the gamifying that occurs if we announce this big window. It gives people a lot of time to prepare. It gives people a lot of time to kind of get their house in order, but it also gives people a lot of time to try to game something, right? And you guys don't see the support tickets. We've got hacked wallets. We've got this. We've got people buying and selling in the open market still, and they try to give an excuse, and the wallet was hacked. We find out it really wasn't hacked. So all this time gets spent on unfortunately bad actors, which are a small minority, but that still exists. So that's the reason. Hope that helps. Somebody says my Blue Pool will go into special black accounts as it's under 10,000. That won't cause an issue with the withdrawal I made last week. Okay, so again, you're asking the question, but you haven't listened to this recording yet. So once you listen to this, you'll understand. It won't. Okay. Actually, he's asking something that brings up an interesting point. If you had 10,000, right, and you initiated a withdrawal, and that dropped you below 10,000, and you choose your financial services, you will get whatever your balance is at that time into black accounts that last for 2 years, and your withdrawal will eventually show up. You know, we have a big migration period, as I said, after that, so expect a little bit of a delay, but you will still get that withdrawal, just to make sure that you understand that. Because you're choosing the financial services, you're not foregoing it. You'd be foregoing the zones in that instance, so therefore any attached pending withdrawal you have still applies. Hope that helps. If the second ocean fills up right away for those in financial services, will another be created? Maybe. I don't know yet. It depends on how much time we have between now and migration, because obviously there's a period where you have Ocean 1, Ocean 2, maybe Ocean 3, but there has to be a sort of, okay, lockdown, the wrong word, but basically snapshot, we'll say, and choice. And that may include or may not include a third ocean. I can't guarantee that. And Eagle Rocks, that also answers your question as well. Somebody says, I liquidated a 10% pool a month ago and was expecting the funds this weekend to pay for fees and roll over. Is it still coming? Yes, it should still come. Should not have a problem with that. So you should be okay there. Again, it has to arrive before the migration period, but you should still be fine. And then, of course, the question, if we're choosing financial services, do we need to renew? Yes. Well, okay, let me back up. When you say renew expiring zones, you're talking about a zone, not the fees necessarily, but a zone that is expiring. As long as you don't fall below a specific tier. So, for example, let's say you're right at 75 zones and you have one that's going to expire, but you want to choose financial services. I would recommend staying at 75 zones, because what's going to happen is you're going to fall out of date with that tier, right? Which means the system's not going to recognize that you have a claim to that 25% pool unless you have 75 or more zones. So yes, for something like that, I would recommend you stay within your pool tier, your financial services tier, more specifically. Community pools don't apply in 2.0. Zeta Black, soon to be Zeta Genesis, is one user, one pool, all stablecoin. We're getting more pools for migration, not at this stage. Will having more zones benefit us? That depends if you're choosing, well, it depends on a couple of things. Let me kind of go into this. So if you're choosing zones, yes, obviously. If you are wanting to catch the next ocean, it will technically emit more, so you will have more to put into the ocean. So in a way, yes. Because remember, the ocean is rollover and token deposit. It's both. So you know how the lake has always been rollover? It's that, but if you have tokens in your wallet or sitting on OTC, you can go and bring them in. So it's both. So if you have, say, pending tokens and you're like, well, I don't know if I should claim these and build more zones. If you're interested in the ocean, you might wait and roll those over. If you have some extra stablecoin, this is completely up to you. You might go and buy off OTC and just put more in. Again, it's completely up to you. But to kind of give you a little potential strategy, yes, it just depends on where your position is currently, which is your personal decision, your personal position, excuse me, and what your strategy is. How long will the ocean remain reserved for only members without previous financial service positions? It will be adjusted. Either what we'll do, I don't know this user's name. It's a little bit crunched on my screen. I apologize. But we'll do either one of two things. We'll either open the existing one to more people, or we'll just open another one. Either one of the two. We'll deem that necessary pretty quickly here, I would imagine. What are the odds we get a commemorative 1.0 NFT? We actually have something. I don't want to go into it yet. Something that benefits the early people in Zeta. One thing I didn't even mention, and I just, this is one of those little detail points that I forgot to mention. This is why further AMAs and clarification will help, especially the articles after the fact that we write, which is that anyone who holds XPRE in their wallet, you're the early day one people who were in the pre-sale for Blue, which technically everybody in blue up to this point will be in the pre-sale for black. Technically, you're going to be bridged over. But nonetheless, if you hold XPRE in your wallet, you will receive 25% off of all your monthly black account fees. Okay, so you get the first month free on black account fees and Blackpool monthly management fees, but then moving forward, if you have XPRE, you'll get 25% off of your black account fees that are your monthly costs. So that's sort of a commemorative, but not really, Bread Slayer, what you're talking about. Gavin has an idea that he wants to have everybody who's in Zeta currently, not just XPRE Prime people, benefit from, but we'll wait and see if that comes to fruition. It sounds really, really, really cool. Sounds doable too, so we'll see. More to come on that later. After migration, will we be able to compound our black accounts? So again, black accounts will not exist after the end of this month. What does that mean? Again, they will be renamed and they'll have a new tier. So when you get a black account, you're getting something that's not going to exist anymore, if that makes sense. If you are migrated into a pool in black, you're going to get something that doesn't exist anymore. If you're at 25%, that will not exist. 10 through 20 will be much higher requirements. So to answer your question, you can still compound into whatever the equivalent is after August, and of course up to the end of August, black accounts if you wish. But yeah, great question. Can you take only profits this weekend from pools if you are just migrating zones? So again, I already answered this, but you don't know because you're not listening to it. I apologize. So you can withdraw and liquidate whatever you want, but it's not going to show up in time. I can already tell you that. And you won't be able to try to do that and then go in the black because the tiers are changing, right? So this is all designed for you to choose one and only one option. Now, if you want to liquidate or take profits, choose your financial services, you'll get that. You will reduce what gets migrated though, so kind of bear that in mind. That's important because in black, Genesis, when we migrate over, you cannot, for example, press a button and go up to another tier. So let's say you have 50,000 and you are at the 10% tier at that time, right? And you happen to have enough profits to have a $100,000 balance, let's say. You don't just get bumped up to the next tier. You have to withdraw, wait for it to arrive, and go back in. That's how it works. So that's why I say, if you are at a certain tier and you're considering taking your financial services, there's a big benefit if you have, say, $50,000 and $100, and you try to take a $5,000 profit withdrawal. Even if you choose your financial services, you're going to be bumped down to the 15% tier because you fell below 50. So you want to keep all this stuff in mind. There's some strategy behind this. Do what you want. It's obviously, if you choose financial services and you want to choose a liquidate or withdraw, that's on you. I'm just giving you some thoughts to consider. Is there any way we can add to our overall pool position that gets us into the next tier? I'm afraid not. Wherever you are is where you are. If you do happen to participate in the oceans, it's going to add black accounts when you migrate. Will we be able to purchase black accounts directly from Blackpool interest gained? Well, what you could do, Crypto Dude, is you can initiate a withdrawal, wait for it to arrive, and then purchase. They won't be called black accounts, they'll be called something else. You can then purchase those with that. You can absolutely do that because that is then your stablecoin. Erickson's. I can't answer what is best for you. What I'm trying to do is I'm trying to give you what the math looks like, what your options are, and then allow you to make the decision that best works for you. So I can't tell you what to do. I only provide clarity and let you make your own decision. So it's being asked, if you were to migrate 6,250 from your financial services to special black accounts, do you receive 1,000 black accounts or 1,000 plus a 250? You should receive a 1,000 plus a 250. Hope that answers that. Withdrawal request times will not be shortened. They will not be shortened, but they're going to be more precise, more accurate, more cleaner, simple, less complex, more straightforward because of any other word I can think of. I'll throw it in there, but because of the withdrawal date modifications that I mentioned, the 1st and 2nd of each month for black accounts, the 15th and 16th for black pools. So we know exactly which days, exactly when they're due, and then the back end will be done. System will fire it off. It'll be very organized, very clean. Solves a whole lot of problems. And we also want to introduce, hopefully the person working on this doesn't kill me for saying this, but we want to introduce a ticketing system directly just for potential withdrawal issues, which really shouldn't occur in the new system at all because of the organization of the schedule and the organization, not even organization, but structure of the new infrastructure we're building. So you really shouldn't have any withdrawal issues. But in the event you did, because tech is what it is, you know, I can build the perfect network, but you're always going to find a issue that occurs. It's just human nature and the nature of technology. We want to have potentially a separate ticketing system just for that gets you directly in touch with the people that can actually move the funds and look at it, because the mods can't, I can't, Gavin can't. That's the reason we have a wealth management partner. So it ends up being this thing where somebody opens a ticket, the mods are in there, they tag somebody, the person's too busy, they don't get a chance to look at it. Several days go by, they tag me, I'm too busy, so it takes me a few days to get in there to see it. By that time, you got about 10 days that have gone by. And then I either inform the person directly or create a spreadsheet and hand it off to the people who can actually look at the withdrawal. Did it come through? Where is it at? So there's a whole lot of time that is wasted in that process. And that's just the nature of the current ticketing system within Discord, which has to be revamped for sure. Part of that revamping is to get you in touch with the people that can actually do something with the withdrawals and have their hand on the button that can actually do something, which is not me, it's not the mods. So that will be vastly improved. Long answer to your short question, I apologize. Yes, lakes will continue to pay out until migration. The plan is that this month's lakes will drop. So there you go. That's another reason to ensure your fees are paid, especially if you have, say, 100 zones and you have one expiring and you are at the 30% tier. You definitely want to ensure you're in the right tier and that your fees are paid if you're in the lakes, because those lakes coming in August are still coming. All right, so I got a question. Somebody saying that they took profits before any kind of announcement was made. He said the 3rd of September. I think that was a typo, so I don't know when you did this. I apologize. If you could, please DM me. You know who you are. I can't see the name at the moment. You know who you are. It's not September, so I think that was a typo. Please let me know when you actually did, and I can provide more clarification. But anyway, he's asking, they took profits and liquidated from pools prior to any kind of migration, and they want to know if they're still going to get it. Of course, you're not listening to this, so you don't know yet, but yes, it was answered. If you're choosing your zones and the withdrawal arrives prior to, you will get it. If it doesn't, and you choose your zones, you forego that claim. Please keep that in mind. XREF cannot be migrated. There's no token. It's a value integer. All it does is tick up when somebody uses your friend zone link to build a zone. So there's nothing to migrate with XREF. They won't have any utility. Again, Black does not have a system like friend zones, doesn't have any kind of referral system at this point. Maybe that will change later, but that does not exist. It might exist in Genesis, we'll see. Trying to understand this question. I apologize if I'm getting it wrong. Once the transaction is in place, will we be able to add Black accounts onto these zones that turn into Black accounts? I don't understand fully the question. I apologize. Could you, one money at a time, I think your name is, could you please DM me? I don't know if I fully understand the question. Your zone count is your zone count. Obviously, the more zones you have, the more Black counts you have. So I don't know if you're asking if there's a way to add on top of that. Yeah, you can go to xetablack.com right now and go buy more if that's what you choose to do. So DeFi Shark, this question was answered. Obviously, you're not listening until you actually listen, which is the negative of answering questions in a pre-recorded AMA. But yeah, go through this. You'll know what the math is for financial services. It's zones or or financial services. Not and or, not and, it's or, to answer your question. But go through this and also go through the accompanying articles to come. You'll know exactly what the math looks like. And we have a lot of questions about pending withdrawals. That's already been answered. I don't want to keep belaboring that. You just go over this as well. Will there be a day we can stop renewing our 15 versus... No, well, you need to keep your fees up to date leading up to migration. If I stay with the financial services, it will be 15% per month for 2 years. I think you're referring to the ocean. Yeah, it's those are going to be migrated into black accounts. Now, those black accounts are not 15%. Guess what? They're double. So there's a little gift for you. So when you go into the ocean, right? Let's say you're in no financial services. You were going to choose your zones. You see the ocean. I want to go in the ocean. You go into the ocean. Those are going to get turned into black accounts. Those black accounts will pay out 30% per month static. They do not compound for 2 years. There is a 2.5% withdrawal fee and a $25 per month stablecoin fee. So for example, $1,000, 30%, $300, right? Well, the 2.5%, so you would multiply that. You know, they say to never do math in a presentation, you lose people, but this is a math thing, so that's why I'm doing it. Multiply that by 0.975. That would get you your net after the fee. Then you subtract $25. That ends up being, you know, about $270, give or take, $267. And over 2 years, that's $6,400. Not bad on just 1,000. It's a 642% increase. Hope that helps. How many more weekends will Blue Pools compound before migration? That is a great question. We're looking obviously this weekend, probably next weekend. I could be wrong. It really just depends on how quickly we get stuff done. Can I just say that? I know that's not the answer you probably want. That's not the answer that makes sense, but yeah, it just depends. We could go through 2 or 3 more, right? It's very possible. It just depends on how quickly we can move. Okay, so will there be an easier way for members that have opted into financial services to utilize those features on a more consistent basis, as opposed to those getting filled extremely quickly? Yeah, that's why we're migrating over to black. There's no timing. You gotta remember, so if you don't know how blue works, and it's not a condescending statement, this is just a generalized statement. If you don't know, tokens are emitted from something called zones, which you buy tokens to make, and the more you make, the higher tier you go into. What that means is that when pools open up, it's a 10, 15, 20, 25% pool that you put your tokens into, and or lakes, and those tokens are then bought back based on profits that occur from the company. And that requires money. That requires us to make money to buy your tokens, to put you into a position where you're earning something ridiculous like 10 or 20 or 25% a month, which is very different than black, because in blue, there's a lot of tokens in circulation. And again, like I said, we had a system that would have kept zones and everything, but you guys would not have liked it. You especially would not have liked it compared to blacks, which is why black is just superior, which is why we're putting our money where our mouth is to move you over to black. In black, it's all stablecoin. There is no Zeta token. There is no, well, I'm going to claim my tokens and compound. I'm going to claim my tokens, go OTC to pay my fees. It's all stablecoin. Stablecoin in, stablecoin out, done. And you're part of Black's development, if I could just speak to that for a moment, was also not just user demand, but we started looking at traditional finance. So the Zeta Blue product really bridged the DeFi people into the DeFi and TradFi bridge. But what if you wanted to bridge the traditional finance people into that DeFi TradFi bridge? Blue's not going to work. It's not going to work. So if somebody approached me and said, hey, got $10 million, I want to put it in, how do I do it? Well, you got to buy 75 zones. What's a zone? What's this saying? It does this and this. Okay, here's the fees. And then, okay, how do I go into the HFT? Well, you have to claim your tokens and you have to wait for a pool. What's a pool? Okay, what are blocks? Okay, Or you could do a lake. What's a lake? Okay, so it's really, 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 really complicated. Really complicated. As opposed to say a black. Oh, make a black account, put it into a 30% pool, done. Oh, there's nothing else? No, it's stablecoin in, stablecoin out, claim once a month or quarterly if you want, pay your fees, and you're good to go. And it's up to whatever tier you go into. So, way simple, a million times simpler. Like, I could give an elevator pitch and explain that in 20 seconds or less. Blue, 20 minutes or less. The original Genesis, 2 hours or less. I'm serious, it was that complicated. So again, that's the reason why black, which will be Genesis, will be even simpler, will make sense. And we do actually have something we want to add into Genesis. It's a little gamified, not a whole lot, just a tiny, tiny bit. You'll see that as we go along. Hope that answered that question. Dan Scanna, I don't mean to be mean, but some of your questions are repetitive, so I'll be skipping over some of them. MT, yes, you will have a written summary of everything. I can't answer your guys' personal situations. I've done that at nauseum over DM, and I don't mean that in a bad way. I just mean I've literally gone over, I don't know, 50 or 100 people, which doesn't sound that much, but doesn't sound like that much, but when you have about 1,000 wallets in blue, that's 10% of the entire project I've gone over. I don't tell them what to do. I just say, hey, look, here's the math and this, here's the math and that. You might consider this, you might consider that, make your choice. So don't ask personal questions about your personal situation and AMA questions, because I can't answer that publicly. When do we have to make the decision? When migration occurs, and you'll know when that occurs. What if someone already initiated an HFT pool withdrawal? Already answered that. Jordan, you can go over this AMA. One money at a time. How long will what black accounts? Oh, sorry, you asked Zone. 1 year. Zone black accounts will last for 1 year. You can't add more to your current list unless you have more zones. Or unless you choose financial services and you go into the ocean, for example. So let me put it this way. There's a question. This is a great question, actually. Will these black zones be referred to sunken costs? I don't know if you're asking from a tax perspective, which I'm not qualified to give you an answer on, but there is an answer to be had here because, you know, zones are a sunk cost. Obviously, you know this. You put 10 tokens in, you got to get 10 back to ROI. And black accounts work that same way, except when you withdraw, you're withdrawing stable coins. So you're stable coin in, stable coin out, whereas in blue, there's some extra hoops to jump through, whereas you get tokens back. What do you do with them? Do you put them into a pool and ROI that way? Do you go into a lake and ROI that way? Do you go into OTC and ROI that way? Do you build more zones and ROI that way? There's different ways to do it, okay? So when you think about a sunk cost, think about something for a minute. You bought a zone. Let's say you spent $750 on it. It's 99 days old. We're now putting $750 for your zone that you already bought, that you probably emitted, what, 9.9 tokens at that point, to then give you a restart back to day one again at full price in black accounts, right? Which make, what, 30% a month minus fees, et cetera, even at the 101 to 199 day, or excuse me, 100 to 199 day time frame, even though you've ROI'd in terms of tokens, right? Maybe you've already cashed those out in OTC. Maybe you have went into pools or lakes. It could be anything really. Even though you've already ROI'd, we're then still buying them back at half, which is 2 zones to 2 black accounts. So we're still putting money aside for you. Even if you're 200 days or older, right? It's a third at $250. So the reason I'm bringing this up is it's kind of hard to say that's a sunk cost when you bought them, ROI'd, and then they're being repurchased off of you for something else that pays you out in the stable coin. It's kind of hard to say you have a sunk cost. Can I just say that? Hopefully that makes sense. This is math to think about, guys. And I've said this to people, it's not about it's not about tokens. So can I just say that? It's about how much fresh cash do you put in and how much fresh cash do you pull out. We deal in cryptocurrency with just tokens and smart contract things like zones that in of themselves, outside of our specific ecosystem, don't have a value. That has a value based on what we've placed on it. In the world of crypto in general, we deal with tokens. But we have to remember, you don't put a token into your bank account, at least not yet, that day's coming. You put money, cash, not even money, I should say, currency for the hard noses out there. The currency is what you put into your bank account. So we have to start measuring ROI and all this based on the currency we take out. So if you put X amount in, I'm rebuying them off of you, migrating you over and starting you back at day one, which goes for another year after you've already gotten tokens back and listed on here or OTC, whatever. That starts you all the way back at day one again. It's kind of hard to say it's a sunk cost. We have to start measuring things based on cash in, cash out. Let's see. If you're rolling over zones and an ocean is made available to you and you put money into it, is it then lost? Well, first of all, you put tokens into it. This goes back to what I just said. I just want to make sure we use the right analogy because the right analogy, not to be a grammar Nazi, I'm just saying, it puts you in the right perspective when you're making decisions. It's the grammar can mean everything. It helps you see things in a different light. So anyway, I don't mean to pick on you. You put tokens into it, I'll say. Is it then lost at rollover since it's financial services? Yes. Yes, that's why it's option A or option B, financial services or zones. The fee structure for Black is on the Black website as well. Let's see, it seems like migration is the first step to 2.0. Will we know the mechanics of 2.0 prior to when we have to decide? Yep, shared them in this AMA, but you don't know that yet. You will watch and you can also read the upcoming articles. Can you let your friend zones expire if they're not? You can. So think about it this way. So we are getting the lake airdrops this month, right? If you're choosing your financial services, and I'm going to use this example again, if you're at 75 zones and your friend zone is about to expire, and when it does, it drops you to 74, then you will need to keep that current. Does that make sense? If you are in the lake airdrops that are coming this month, you need to keep it current because all your fees have to be paid. So the answer is you can let it expire, but it all depends on where you are, if that makes sense. If you're choosing zones, yeah, you let them expire all day long. But when the migration comes, you do have to be paid on your fees. So if it's literally going to expire, like it's going to go away, you can let it go away. It's not going to be migrated. If you're talking about fees, the fees need to be paid up to date. Crypto Dude's asking when fees are due, accounts, we're talking about Black accounts, I am conjecturing here. Accounts are unable to be withdrawn, which makes sense, but will Black account fees and Black pool fees be separated? Yes, they're separated. They're separate, excuse me. You pay your Black accounts, you pay your Black pools separately. Hope that helps. Will all blue pool withdrawals, yeah, we already discussed withdrawals. I need to withdraw funds to pay my fees. I think you're talking about, Big Ty, I think you're talking about after migration. Need to withdraw funds to pay my fees. I assume you're talking about you need to withdraw from Black accounts to pay Black pool fees. I'm assuming here. DM me if I'm wrong, please. I understand that the first cycle is on the house. My concern is getting the funds withdrawn before the fees are due for the second cycle. So, again, you have, think of it this way. So let's say you've got Black accounts, you got Black pools. There's a migration process that's going to take us a little bit of time. When we're done, that's day one. Right there is day one. Next 28 days, you pay no fees. 28 days after that, your fees are due. Make sense? So in other words, look at it this way. You are, and we're talking specifically Black pools here. Specifically Black pools, because Black pools will almost always have their fees due at the end of the month because they have to trade, determine the profit, which adds to your balance, which then you pay 2.5% of. So the Black pools are going to typically be paid at the end of the month. Okay? By the point and the time we have day one, 28 days later, you can theoretically initiate a Black account withdrawal, which takes 28 days, give or take, to show up. And by the time your Black pool fees are due, your withdrawal should be there. That's just, and I always say this is a strategy. It's not the only strategy. So you can withdraw from black accounts to pay your black pool fees. That's not the only thing you could do. You can bring in fresh capital if you want. You can withdraw from your pools if you want and use part of that. Maybe you withdraw from your pools and you build more black accounts after you pay your fees. And maybe whatever you have left after you pay your fees, you just keep building more black accounts. It's up to you. There's a lot of different ways to skin a cat. So, you know, I'm not telling you that is the strategy. That is maybe a strategy you could consider. And yes, black has the same grace period as blue. Let's see. I'm not going to go through too many more, guys. This is getting pretty long, and we've gone over a number of questions. Yeah, black accounts are 1% per day. So do they earn 28 or 30? Well, they earn 1% per day. Depends. Are you going off 28 days or 30? If you're going off 28 days, it's 28%. If you're going off 30 days, it's 30%. Half century mark, okay. I'm not a fan of answering questions where there's just like all of these possible scenarios. Do these scenarios have a real person attached to them? That's my question. I don't mean to sound snarky when I ask that, but give me a real person and I'll give you an answer to that real person. You did say you fall into scenario 1, so I'm going to answer that, okay? Member made profit withdrawal from pools before announcement was made. Can this still migrate their zones? Already answered that. So you'll go through this AMA and you'll know. And guys, again, please keep the AMA questions channel to questions. Questions. There's no chance to increase your pool amounts. Is it possible to have a confirmation on a cutoff date for the less than 100 days? It's going to be based on when the migration occurs. Now, you're going to have some time to make the migration choice. You're not going to have a lot of time. Okay, so I don't have an exact amount of time you're going to have, but it's probably not going to be more than a couple days to make your choice. The day you make your choice, the calculation will be run from that moment, that minute, literally that second. How many of your zones are between, well, I guess 0, we can say 0 if you just built one, 0 to 99 days, 100 to 199, and 200 or older. That calculation is done on the fly at the moment. So the calculation you see when you choose to migrate will show that at the time. So it just depends on, do you wait a couple of days? Do you do it right away? That's where it depends. Have a nice day. That's a great, you know, in the world of negativity, it's a great name to have. Great username. He's asking, if you got into Lake 1 when that migrates to a black account, is the timer reset to 2 years? It is. It is indeed. It is indeed. So it's restarting. The sustainability of black is fine. So when we talk about, say, sustainability of black, what we're discussing is not tokens. We're not discussing buybacks. We're not discussing fees being split towards treasury, operations, buybacks, trading to pull out, to you open pools and lakes, all this kind of stuff. We're not talking about any of that. So it removes a whole lot of complexity out of the question. Or the equation, I should say. So when we talk about sustainability of black, it comes down to the trading. And I would ask, have you liked the trading so far? Have you enjoyed the trading so far? I mean, we've been here for a year, right? Haven't had issues to trading. Have you enjoyed the trading so far? That's how the sustainability of black is going to be based on. Of course, there's other factors. So some of those factors, and some people have asked, you know, are the tiers going to change later again? And I always tell them it's possible. Now, everybody hates that answer, and I hate that answer too, but I don't have a crystal ball, right? I haven't figured out how to tell, you know, the future yet. And it's based on things such as the fund grows, you become more and more of a market maker. If you kind of picture a pie, you know, if you are, the bigger you are, you take up more of that pie. So the more pie you take up, the less effective your trades are, because you're you're trading against yourself, if that makes sense. Okay, so the larger the fund gets, ultimately over time, it's inevitable returns will diminish. Even if I don't come in there and say, hey, returns are going from 20 to 15, you will notice they just won't hit 20 anymore. It just will. Now, we got a while before that's ever going to occur. Usually once you get between $250 million to $500 million is where you typically tend to find that. There's ways to diminish it. You can utilize other brokers, you can utilize other liquidity providers, you can utilize various strategies, you can utilize various sub accounts, but all of that patching is just temporary, and eventually, as the fund just gets to bigger and bigger and bigger sizes, tiers can and will be dropped. It's inevitable. So when we talk about sustainability, right, the one thing we're talking about now is the trading, because there's no zones, there's no tokens, there's no buybacks, there's no treasuries, none of that stuff. It's one of the beauties of Black is that it is so darn simple. I can pitch it in an elevator in 20 seconds or less, probably less than that too. So we talk about sustainability, comes down to the trading, comes down to the size of the fund, comes down to market conditions, all that fun stuff. So I hope that helps. Is there going to be any changes to the length of time someone can be in a Black pool? If we enter one before migration, will they stay endless until we withdraw and are grandfathered? Yeah, so whatever tier you're in gets grandfathered. So if you're in 25, let's say 25%, because that's the one that's not going to exist anymore. You're in 25%. Now, the example that I just used, as returns tend to diminish, right? You would be affected first because you're at the highest tier that doesn't even exist anymore. Does that make sense? So the higher you are in the tier, the sooner you would be technically impacted by any kind of diminishing return. Again, we're a long way off from that, unless some massive capital comes in, tomorrow. So yeah, as long as you have the pool, as long as you don't fully liquidate, you're grandfathered in. Whether that comes from migration or that comes from the fact that you go to xetablack.com and go buy a Black pool, you're grandfathered in until it, gets liquidated. We don't stake in Black. We have pools. I guess technically you could say from tax perspective it's staking, but yeah. Don Peasy just answered the question that I answered. One of the reasons I want to remove conversations. So guys, don't answer other people's questions. Don't converse. Don't chat in the AMA questions. It's just for questions, please. Appreciate it. So I'm going to delete some of these. So if you saw your post deleted, that's why. I'm going to only answer like maybe a couple more. Let's see. Again, I don't like answering fictitious scenarios, but I will answer this one. Start with 25,000. After the first month becomes 28,750. What will the fees be? Well, I'm assuming you mean a pool. I don't know. I think you are assuming here. Excuse me, I'm doing some math. I think you're assuming a 15% pool, yeah? So after you make the 15%, you pay 2.5%, which would be $718.75 in your example. That would be the fees after month one. And if you were to compound into month two, that $28,750 turns into $33,062.50, which then would have 2.5% applied to that, which is $826.56. So the fees grow with the balance growing. Now, some people say, well, I have to withdraw more. Well, that's not a bad thing, guys, because you realize your profit's more. We have this, it's a meme in crypto. If you've been in crypto, you've seen it, the infinite compounder. You've probably seen that. It's kind of funny, but it is very true. Everything in life has risk. There's a risk to everything. There's a risk to doing things. And by the way, there's a risk to not doing things at the same time. There's a risk to working out. I could injure myself seriously and be in a worse position than I would be if I didn't work out. There's a risk that if I don't work out, I'm unhealthy and I have some disease later in my life, or I'm frail and weak and can't pick up my baby. So there's risk to doing things, risk to not doing things. So why do I bring that up? Well, there's risks to crypto and risks to not being in crypto. There's risks to being in pools and there's risks to not being in pools. You're going to lose to inflation. So what I always tell people is there's nothing wrong with taking your profits. As a matter of fact, I would encourage you to do that. This system, if I may say, kind of forces you to do that because eventually, regardless of how many Black accounts you have, you will eventually have your pool fees outpace whatever your Black accounts make. And you will eventually have to withdraw from your pools. It's inevitable unless you just have a crazy amount of outside stablecoin, you can just pay your fees. In which case, it doesn't matter. It will eventually outpace. So you will be forced to take profits. It's not a bad thing. It helps you to pay your fees, and it helps you to enjoy it. It helps you to ROI, and it helps you to realize some of your goals, unless your goal is to just stare at a number on a screen. If your goal is to stare at a number on screen, then don't withdraw. If your goal is to actually use your pools, your black accounts, whatever they may be, to do real things in real life for real people, to meet real goals that you have and real dreams, then that's what you do. So one of the things I personally like is I actually like that this system forces people to kind of take profits along the way. It's not a bad thing, guys. Trust me, it's really not a bad thing. It's what, personally, as a founder, I would recommend take your profits. If someone has two zones, one over 100 and one under 100, what do they get? So one under 100 would give you two, a 500 and a 750. Now, in the example of over 100, now I don't think you knew about the 200 day when you wrote this. Probably nobody knows about it until they are listening to this. So I'm going to assume that this is under 200, but over 100. So typically in that realm, in that category, you would exchange two zones for two black accounts, but because you only have one, it's just going to get exchanged at 250 because the math is never going to be perfect. It's never going to be, everybody who has a zone that's 100 days, right, to 199 has two. Some people are going to have one, they're going to have three, they're going to have five, they're going to have seven. So whichever one is left over will give you a $250 black account to make up for that. Just makes it simple that way. All right, let's see. Maybe, let me just look through the questions, see if there's any really dire one. I'll take these last four. It was after I said, last warning, not a place to chat. I'll take the next four. These will be pretty quick. So, yeah, well, actually, the first one is about withdrawing profits again, so we're not going to answer that. MECP2, good to hear from you, or read from you, I should say. Some months we've had 3 lakes and they all filled within minutes. Will the ocean that becomes available to everyone? I don't know that there's going to be an ocean available to everyone, so that might answer your question. Again, we have the one currently that's only $0 in financial services or less. The next one we plan to make $25,000 financial services or less. So I don't believe you fall into that category, but I think you might have some people who do. And if they do, and they have tokens that are sitting on waiting, it might be something you want to consider. But it kind of negates the question because I think you were asking if it would eat up everybody's tokens. Burry Nice is asking if we could have oceans gradually according to tiers, starting from 6% and up. It's kind of the approach we're doing right now, but here's the thing, man. I want to give people who, they got 5 zones, they got 9, they got 15, they got 20 or whatever, and they see the pools come and go because they're not sitting at their computer, and I don't blame them. A lot of these people I've spoken to are like, man, if I could have only known about black before, I would have just went into black. And they'd say, it's nothing against you. It's just the system's hard unless you're glued to Discord and I get it. That's the main reason we're doing what we're doing. So, yeah, so we are going to be gradually opening them, but I really want to give those people the option of financial services. That's what the intention is. And to just keep casting a wider and wider net. Migration of zones will commence when it's ready. I know that's an answer that you were probably not looking for, but it's the answer that I have. Yes, there'll be a warning before closing the zone creation. And I have 3 expired zones on my account to which I took profit. Good. 12 fresh zones 2 weeks ago. Will the 12 newly created zones be migrated to black? If you are opting and electing to migrate your zones over your financial services, the answer is yes. Yes, and that is shamelessness, I'm looking at the screen, I'm not showing the screen, so if you're watching this, you're trying to figure out who's asking the question. To save time, I'm just not really showing the usernames or not stating the usernames. It's just easier to just answer the question. So yeah, you have 3 expired zones on your account, you have 12 you just purchased. So yeah, if they're purchased 2 weeks ago, okay, I'll just run some quick math for you. Your 12 zones would become 24 black accounts. So 12 multiplied by 750 is 9,000. At 30%, I'm just going to withdraw all the fees for you. You're looking at about $2,000 a month for the next year, give or take. And again, nothing I say is a guarantee of profits. I always say this. I don't guarantee anything other than that, unless the rapture occurs, death. Simple as that. So in that example, around 24,000 in the next 12 months. In that example, which is not a guarantee of profits. We'll do one more question. Let's see who's going to get the last one. One thing, guys, if you're asked your question, try to keep it short. Some of these long questions about, well, what if I do this and I do that? Just please try to keep it concise, because reading that long of a question could literally have 6 or 7 answers, and I'm trying to get through these as quickly as possible. So you'd really be best to get your question answered try to be as concise and condensed as possible. I would really appreciate it. Let's see. Okay, this is a great question. I'm gonna end on this one. Reaganomics? Why are the goalposts being moved? There must be something wrong. There's nothing wrong. It happens to be that there's a product that's better that I'm paying to move you to. Right? It's better for you, and it's way better for the company. Why is it better for you? The reason it's better for you is because if you've been in Zeta Blue for any period of time, we allowed people to have their cake and eat it too. And I don't mean that in a condescending way, but it's a fact. Why is that a fact? Because we fixed a price so that when you bought in at 75, it didn't go down to 5. And it's harder for you to ROI based on the same tokens you emit. You now get the same price you bought in at. And as a matter of fact, if you did it early on, your price went from 60 to 75, so you ROI'd even quicker. And that also allowed you to not just list an OTC at the same price you bought in or higher. It allowed you to accumulate heavy financial service positions at a fixed value, right? So that is a heck of a cake to eat. Now, in a world where we want the tokenomics to work more efficiently, right? I would say, okay, let's bring back the DEX and let the price go to 20 cents. Why? Because guess what? That pool would take a long time to fill up, but then you would have to put a lot of tokens in just to get one block. You get my point? Which means if you bought it, theoretically, 75 bucks and it goes down to $1, it's going to be harder for you to ROI even in a pool, because the value is far less than what you bought in at. So everything that has been done has always been for the end user at the end of the day. And when we look at black and we look at blue, we don't need 2 stablecoin products. One stablecoin project is enough. And it's so efficient and it's so simple, and it's designed in such a simplicity and in a godlike timeline where it was already done and we had something to move people to, that has been in testing for 6 months now. It's easy in the sense that, okay, we don't have to go out and build black. It already exists, and the users are proven as better. You ask anybody who's in blue and who's in black, which one's better? They're going to tell you not 100% is not possible in anything. So I'm not going to say 100% of the people, but the vast majority of people are going to tell you black is better. Not my words. Those are the vast majority of people's words. Although it is my words, I think it is better. It's better for the company, but it's better for the user, because now you don't have to bother waiting for OTC. You don't have to bother waiting for when is a pool going to open up, and you're, sitting there drinking caffeine, staring at Discord for 25 hours a day, right? Am I going to get into a pool? Can I create a script to tell me when I'm going to get it, when a pool opens? When's a lake going to open? Like, you don't have to bother. And especially if you have purchased tokens, you compound it up, you're like, I have to get into pools, because that's the genesis, no pun intended, of getting into this project. If the pools didn't exist, you probably wouldn't be here, if I could be honest. Pools and lakes didn't exist. If it was just a zone selling, not much of a really reason or demand to come in for services that aren't there. So when you look at something like that, there's a lot of gamification elements. There is a lot of timing elements that if you don't time it, you miss out. And what if, and I know that there's these people that exist, they've got 80 zones and have never gotten into a pool or lake, hence the reason the ocean is there. When you go over to black, when you have an account, that's it. When you have a pool, that's it. There's no timing, there's no sitting around your Discord, trying to get someone to send you a text message when it opens and rush home and leave your lunch break, all this stuff, right? And it's better for the company. Why is it better for the company? It's better for the company because nothing's bought back. It's all fresh stablecoin, right? So there's no more going to be profits generated by Zeta Capital to buy back tokens, right? So it's better for us. It's better for you. Everybody wins. Again, we had a system that kept zones and all this stuff. You probably would not have liked it. And regardless of how we designed it, it was always inferior to black. It's like, just, you're gonna do change, do it right. That's why we're doing it. So hopefully that helps for ergonomics. This, again, I've beaten this horse dead, will be accompanied by an article, by probably more AMAs, I'm sure, because there's a lot of questions I didn't get to in the AMA questions channel, which reminds me, please post your questions in there. If there's something I didn't cover, if there's something I glossed over, if there's something I missed, there's a lot of content and detail, so it's very likely I did. Please post it in there. And again, folks, don't answer questions in there. Don't chat in there. Just ask questions. That's it. Because that's what that channel is for. It helps me to aggregate everything a lot easier. So again, this is a lot to take in. But, you know, black's just a better product. You know, to me, I'll tell you this. It wouldn't be fair to migrate somebody who has been here, whether it's day one or yesterday or today, to a product that's inferior, in my opinion, to black, when black is clearly better. So it's not me, it's not necessarily just my money, it's the company reaching into its pockets to move people over to something that's better for them, better for us. Everybody wins, but there is a lot of nuances, and I understand that. So we'll have future AMAs, and we're, again, I mentioned this in the Discord, we're moving fast and furious. So based on the math, based on everything that you have information-wise, I would recommend that you make that decision and strategize appropriately, because now you've been in blue. Even if you weren't in the pre-sale, you were in the pre-sale for black, which is now going to be Zeta Genesis, which is the, again, genesis of Zeta Capital moving forward. So hope this helps, guys. Take care. God bless. Until next time, we'll talk again. Thanks a lot.